It's a cold, snowy January day, much different from where I lived in warm, sunny Florida, but I love it here. These are scenes from my woods where my art studio is located. I love walking through the snowy woods and seeing how the snow transforms everything. Sky is so pretty. This is the creek. It's covered by snow. We had about 8 to 10 inches of snow. You can see some of the hoof prints of the deer along here. They walk along the creek most days. Here's the glow of the sun rising over the snowy ridge, which is what inspired me to create this watercolor painting. I went back to my studio and started sketching the composition. This is a speeded up version of the sketch prior to painting it. When I moved back from Florida, I was a bit apprehensive about the cold and the snow here. It did take some adjusting, but fortunately I'm able to work from home and I rarely have to drive anywhere. So that's a plus, especially in the winter months. I grew up in the Midwest, then moved to Florida and lived there several years. Our homeschooling years were spent there, and our work life was based there. Over time, though, the area became crowded, and the hurricanes became more challenging, and I found I really missed the changing seasons. Here in the sketch, I'm adding a light bluish gray wash for the sky, as well as the snow-covered areas. For the shadows on the ridge, I'm using a blend of blues and purples, and I'm also allowing the white of the paper to show through in several places. When I was living and working in Florida, I did have to contend with the traffic there, but in my current location, a rural woodsy area with very little traffic, I hardly have to have any encounter with other cars or people on the streets at all. When I do need to drive somewhere, it's a breeze compared to when I lived in Florida. Also, in Florida, we were involved in homeschooling, and even then we enjoyed taking nature walks each day. That was a big part of our homeschooling, getting outside and observing the various changes we saw every day and the discussions those walks prompted. It was a great time. Eventually, though, I felt the need to get back to my roots, and that led to selling our house, packing everything up, and moving up north to a less crowded, more peaceful area. Here in the sketch, I've added the sun coming over the ridge. It'll be diluted more as the painting proceeds. I'm beginning to add the background of the evergreen trees. For the trees, I'm using a mixture of phthalo blue, deep turquoise, and deep green watercolors. After moving to our home in the woods, I decided to set up this art studio here and start painting. I've been so inspired by the beauty surrounding me, the sunrise through the trees, the sunsets, the changing scenery. After taking so many photos of it all, I decided I just wanted to start painting my interpretation of the views around me. I like capturing the feeling and the memory of the times in the woods, and that's what this painting is. It's capturing an image, a feeling, a moment in time from my walk in nature on a cold, snowy, but beautiful January day. In the painting, I'm continuing to build up the shadows with deeper blues and purples, and I'm adding more contrast to the trees in the background. I used darker blends of phthalo blue and deep greens and deep purple to create darker shadows in the trees. I'm just going over different areas with the shadows because it is an incline, it's a hilly side of the ridge. There's a lot of rolling hills and valleys in this area. So that ridge is quite steep where the sun is coming over the top of it there. This is the contrast in the evergreen trees. As you can see in my palette on the right, I've mixed up a darker color of blues and greens. I add a little bit of purple in there to get the darker shadows and the contrast into the trees. I'm doing the trees on the right they'll be a little bit lighter. They'll have some lighter highlights of paler green where the glow of the sun is actually touching on them as the painting proceeds. There again, I'm adding in contrast with the deeper blues and purples. This is speeded up, so I obviously don't paint this fast. Now I'll begin adding trees in the foreground. Those will be using a mixture of burnt umber, Prussian blue, and a tiny bit of purple to create a bluish black color for the trees. These are just stark trees, mostly pine trees. They've lost their leaves. The oak and maple trees have all lost their leaves by January. For the shadows cast by the trees on the snow, I'm using more of the purplish blue color. The cast shadows are coming down the incline from the ridge, which is actually a very steep ridge. This is how the sun looks in January as it's rising above the ridge line. This is all based on the photo I took early in the morning on my walk. Next, I put some snow up against the trunks of the trees to help seat them better in the landscape. Now I'm adding snow on the evergreen branches and adding some highlights with a lighter green and pale green. And I'll add contrast to the trees again after I've added some of the lighter shades. And now I'll let it dry, and this is continuing onward with the paint on the trees. I previously added the rusty orange leaves of the shrubs and small trees, which provide a really nice pop of color to the scene. Then I add a bit more of the white highlight on top of the snow. And on top of the branches. Here I'm adding a highlight on the edge of the trees where the glow of the sun is touching on them. I use a light gray, light Payne's gray, and some white mixture for the light highlights on the trees. The ground is quite rugged here, actually. There's always branches and vines on the ground. They're covered by the snow, but they create variations and shadows in the snow. Every day I walk in the woods, morning and evening. And when there's snow, you can see many different animal prints. There's raccoons, rabbits, lots of squirrels, of course, fox and bobcat at times, and always deer walking along the paths and trails. The deer sleep in the woods. They make deer beds, which are oval-shaped indentations in the snow where they curl up and stay warm overnight. So I usually see 2 or 3 of those throughout the woods when I take my walks in the morning. I'm always so inspired by my walks in the woods. It just makes me want to take photos and take videos and then paint it when I get back to the studio. So it's something that I think everyone should do, whether you're homeschooling your children and want to take nature hikes with them, regardless of the season. You can take photos and videos to inspire you to paint. Then you can discuss what you saw on your walks through the woods, the different things you observed. Or if you take walks through the park in your neighborhood or around your home, there's always new and different things to see and talk about. Maybe you can get a sketchbook and start sketching on paper you have on hand, or add a bit of watercolor paints to the sketches, or just sketch and paint the things you see, and then keep them as a treasure, as a memory of your time spent with your family or your time spent alone. Life can be so busy and so stressful. There's always changes and new events occurring in our lives, and sometimes we just have to get away from the stress. We have to get away from the news and find some peace and quiet each day. Here I'm adding some more contrast to the trees and a little bit of highlight of a paler green on the trees. Again, that highlight's coming from the glow of the sun coming over the ridge there. When we go for walks with our family or by ourselves, we're able to get back in touch with each other and with ourselves as individuals, with who we are, and with the simple life around us. That's very important. It changes your whole perspective each time. Each walk you take outside, it changes your perspective and brings you so much peace and joy. It's something that's just so critically important to our well-being, to every person, regardless of age. Whether you're 20-something or 50-something or 70-something or a 10-year-old or a teenager, it's important to get outside and get into nature. Get in touch with yourself, with who you are as a human being and how you relate to nature and to life around you and to each other. You can start a nature sketchbook, or if it's too cold or too hot to sketch or paint outside, set up an area in front of a window, maybe in front of your favorite window with your favorite view, and just observe what you see, the birds or animals or people passing by, and keep those sketches. And keep those quick little watercolor paintings. Note the date on the back of them or in the corner of them so that you'll know what you were doing that day and how you felt that day. It makes each day worthwhile. Anytime you can pick up a pencil or pick up a paintbrush, it brings so much meaning to your day. And that sketch or painting, it just captures that meaning, that feeling of that day. You can really get lost in it. You might think, well, I'll just sketch for 10 minutes or paint for 10 minutes, and you become so caught up in it, you're so immersed in the scene you're painting that you're actually there. You're no longer sitting in your room or wherever you might be while you're painting. Instead, you're actually in the scene you're painting, and it just takes you away. It's similar to reading a good book. You get to escape for a while into another life. Well, this is very similar. This can be your life. Escape into it. Take walks, take pictures, paint what you see, and immerse yourself in the joy of those moments. It will change your life and change it for the better. Here's the finished painting of my walk. I'm just adding final details to it. It has that nice glow in the background from the sun. Now I'm adding a few final details to it. Some branches and twigs, weeds here and there. And come back in with some highlight on the snow. But for the most part, the painting's about done. A little bit more on the trees. As you look at your final painting, you'll come up with more you want to add to it to give more dimension to things like the trees and the snow. Maybe on the sides of the trees where the light's hitting it. Here I'm adding a little bit more contrast to the trees in the front. But take a walk today. Take some pictures today. And try sketching it and painting it when you get home. Everybody comes up with a different interpretation of what they see when they go for a walk. See what you come up with. There's the finished painting. I hope you enjoyed watching today. See you next time.